If you are looking to stop writing these dependencies manually, if you want better Makefiles, if you want Make to do what AutoMake or CMake does, then I will show you how to change this Makefile into this Makefile. And after that, you won't have to manually manage these dependencies anymore. You won't have to add or change your Makefile every time you add or remove a file. And your build system will be separate from your development processes. Now let's get started. And the file or the project that I'm going to be working on as an example is the exact project in the simple C project that we saw before. Very quickly going over it, we have a main which calls hello world and print hello and print world from hello and world. And both of these two files, they depend on common to help them with the printing. Now, this is a working Makefile, and everything has been handwritten. Everything has been hard-coded. And we're going to change that slowly. We've learned a bunch of tools in the other sections, so let's begin to use them. The first thing that we're going to do is we're going to try to follow the principle of least repetition or no repetition, where you never repeat a file name more than once. And the next rule, well, we might switch it around. The next rule is going to be to use automatic variables. So first off, let's begin with the automatic variables. And this first rule over here, there's nothing to do with automatic variables. The second rule over here, the -o specifies the output file, and the output file is this over here. So we can replace that with a $@. And these are the prerequisites. As you see, VS Code highlighted them down there too. We can replace this with $up to, which expands to all of these prerequisites up here. Now down here, main.c is the first prerequisite, so we say $left, and the same for these. Now, something very cool that we see is that we have the exact same recipe for 1, 2, 3, and 4 different files. So what we can do is we can combine them into one. So to do that, we'll have main.o, and then hello.o, world.o, and common.o. And they will all have this recipe over here. And now we don't need to rewrite that recipe every single time. And next up, we would like to remove, we see one thing being repeated over here, so we would like to remove that repetition. And what we can do is we can have a variable. Let's start off with source files. And we can set that to main.c, hello.c, world.c, and common.c. This is typically how you would do it. And then we would generate the object files from the source files. So we would use the pattern substitute function, and we're going to replace every .c with a .o instead. And we're going to do that for every value in source files. Now we can replace these object files with the actual variable object files. Now, one more thing we could fix is that we know that every .o depends on a .c. So we can put that over here. We can say, we can make this into a static pattern rule where anything that matches a %.o is going to have a %.c prerequisite, and then we can erase these things over here. And finally, if you'd like, this is not really necessary, but you can change this star.o to the object files so that you're actually specifying which files you want to delete. Actually, we have steal over here. We repeated it 3 times, so we can make that into a variable as well. And we can just call it app name. So up here, and I'll move that down below. And over here as well. Great. Now, what we have is a section up here where we do the configuration. This part is automatic. It's going to work for any config that we put up here. And this part down here is something that we have to write ourselves for now, but we will fix that in just a moment. So up until this point, if there is any operation that I did, if there is any substitution, any change that I did that doesn't make sense to you, I encourage you to stop, to pause, to look into it. We have a number of videos in the Make Essentials section that explain what each of these things are. These are automatic variables. These are just normal handwritten variables. This thing over here is a static pattern rule, so that's under the more rules section. And this should all be very straightforward, very simple things. With that said, let's move on to the next section. And what we want to do is we want to automate the generation of these rules over here. What some people might have done, 20, 30 years ago in the 1990s or before that, they might have written a script that would parse the main.c file and figure out what these are. And with those, they would write their own makefile. We don't need to do that anymore. Compilers are smart enough to do that for us as long as we ask them nicely. So the way you ask GCC, and I believe it's the same for Clang, the way you ask them nicely is to add a flag, and I'm not going to add it directly here. I'm going to add it to another variable over here instead. cdebs flags. We're going to ask them by passing the mmd and the mp flags. So these are two flags that are part of the M family. These run in the pre-processing stage, and what they do is they extract the includes of the source files and create a makefile with those includes. So when we pass this over here, I'll show you the result in a moment. It is actually going to create a makefile, and let's actually run that. Before I do anything else, let's just run make. And we can see on the left over here that we have a number of .d files now. And this is exactly what we want. We can see that hello.o from here, we have it depending on hello.h and common.h. Over here, it depends on hello.c and hello.h and common.h. We didn't really need the hello.c since we already listed it ourselves, but this is a nice bonus. We can erase it from here if we want to. But this is the important part. It created these two things for us. The -mp flag created these other two targets, and that's useful if you ever want to delete a header file. Either you rename it or you delete it, you don't need it anymore. If you didn't have this, then with this rule over here, hello.o would depend on hello.h, but if it doesn't exist, then you would get an error. If you have a rule like this, even if it doesn't have a recipe, it's going to ignore that error. So that's why we want the mp flag, and we want these extra blank rules. And we got this generated for all of the files. So we can see for common and main and world as well. What we want to do now is we want to include those files so that instead of these, we are actually pulling in these extra .d files. And there is the include directive in Make that you may have heard about. And we're going to include those files. So first, let's create a variable that is going to evaluate to those. And we can do that using the pattern substitute function again. And the format is main, or the file name, .d. So we're going to take the source files one more time, and we're going to replace every .c with a .d. And now depends is going to evaluate to all of those .d files, and we can include all of those. The first time we run this makefile, these files are not going to exist. So if we try to include something that doesn't exist, we're going to get an error. And because of that, at the beginning of this line, we're going to put a minus sign so that if there is an error, we're just going to silently drop it. We don't really care. And now if I run this makefile, oh, well, there's nothing there, but, and actually let's add these to the clean as well. And now if I make, it generates all of the files that we want. And if I touch, for example, common.h and I run make, it had to recompile hello and world and common.c, but it didn't have to recompile main.c. If I touch hello.h, it is going to recompile hello.c and main.c. So this file works exactly the same as the initial file that we started off with. I have split this off into different sections that you can see in the GitHub repo, and there'll be a link to that below if you want to go around and look at how this evolved from one stage to the next, and you don't have to go back and forth in the video. I encourage you to understand deeply every single line. There is a lot of very peculiar and specific syntax, but the ideas of what is being done is very straightforward. So I believe in you, you can do it. You can get a better automatic makefile. The next step in a project like this might be to move all of the .ds and the .os to a separate build directory. That's called making an out of tree build. But for now, I think this is a major milestone. Thanks for watching and hope to see you next time.